Crested geckos are by far one of my favorite species of lizards and one of the best you could possibly own. It's great for a beginner, it's great if you're an advanced keeper, and today we're going to go through a step-by-step care guide so you can take care of your crested gecko. My name's Adam, this is Wicked's Wicked Reptiles. Stick around. On this channel, you'll often see me with a leopard gecko crawling around on my shoulder. And the only reason that I've got a leopard gecko all the time is because they're super chill and they're easy to keep, so I've got quite a few of them. And also, I don't have to worry about it going up behind my head and climbing up on walls and jumping onto a wall. With these guys, you do. Crested geckos are kind of a smaller, almost medium-sized gecko, a true gecko that does not have eyelids, from New Caledonia, which is an island in the South Pacific, which is kind of temperate. It's a lot cooler just because of the climate and the topography and the vegetation that grows there in comparison to other islands in that same vicinity. In the wild, they are nocturnal fruit eaters, although sometimes they will eat insects, according to some reports. But in captivity, we don't have to worry about that too much. Let's go ahead and get right into it. Size. Well, you can see this is a full-grown female. And the reason I know she's a female, because she's got some babies that popped out a few weeks ago. You can watch that video right here if you're interested. She is a fantastic specimen. I love this animal. She's super cool. She's a little bit more skittish than any of my leopard geckos, but this is how big they get. Usually between 4 and 4.5 inches is pretty normal for an adult, female or male. They are not really super different in size when they get to adulthood, to full-grown maturity. And then if you include the tail, which Frogbutt here doesn't have, she doesn't have a tail. It's very common. A lot of the times at pet expos, even younger adults or younger individuals will not have tails. They might get to 8 inches with the tail. You'll see a picture of one with the tail here. This is Charizard, and Yoshi is the female right here. So I've got Charizard and Yoshi. They pumped out a few babies. And of course, because they don't get super big, you don't need a super big enclosure for them either. And they're one of the ones I would suggest that you could definitely cohabitate if you do it right. We'll get to that closer at the end of the video. With crested geckos, you can get away with the equivalent of a 10-gallon. That's what I would suggest minimum. I would much rather you see the equivalent of a 20-gallon or 15. I don't like saying 10. Like, they say that in a lot of the forums or care sheets online. I think it's too small, in my opinion, for one adult. And a lot of the times people will keep 2 or 3 together. And for this, I think an 18 by 18 by 24 Exo Terra, which you'll see here, which is what she lives in, with another crested gecko, is perfect for a pair or one single crested gecko. Babies, you can get away with temporary enclosures that consist of like tubs, Tupperware things, that type of idea. But the babies that I've got, you can see, is a fully planted, fully bioactive terrarium. It's a 1 foot by 1 foot by 18-inch enclosure, and that's perfect for these 2 babies that I've got here. It might even be a little bit too big according to some people, but they find the food just fine. That's all that matters. And in their enclosure, it's going to be a little bit different than some of the other animals we've talked about on this channel, because a lot of the animals that I talk about are terrestrial, and these guys are not. They are arboreal, or some people will say semi-arboreal lizards, and that is true. So you're going to want something that's a little bit higher than it is long, and you're going to want all the hides and amenities that they need to be higher off the ground. That's what I would suggest. So your stereotypical turned over coconut hide that you're going to see in a lot of leopard gecko enclosures won't really work unless you have it on a platform or suspended somehow with these guys. So what I do is I just put lots of plants and I let them hide within the plants, like you're going to see a baby doing right here. Or you could just have them hiding on the wall behind a plant, like this baby right here. But on the ground, you need something, right? You don't want to just be bare. And because these guys do need a little bit higher humidity, which is the next category we're going to talk about with these guys, you want it to be a loose substrate, in my opinion, that holds moisture well. So what I like to use is coconut coir, right? So you can use an eco-earth or a substitute like Beyond Peat. I use this. This is perfect. And of course, it's an egg-laying medium too if your female becomes gravid and you don't notice and little babies surprise you. But that's another video, which I pointed to earlier in the video. And another interesting thing too is you don't need standing water with crested geckos. Because they're going to drink off of the leaves and off of the surfaces inside their enclosure, you just mist them twice a day. You get a misting system if you want. That works too. But you don't need standing water. You can keep it in there if you want. Just a shallow dish. They're not great swimmers, even though they have these really cool padded feet. But the idea is spray them down, make sure that they've got an opportunity to drink. I always spray them in the morning and at night as well, and that because they are nocturnal, right? So they can drink either time. And of course also they need food, and with their food, you're going to need a food bowl, right? Or a food cup. A deli cup is perfect. But before we get into food, let's talk about heating and lighting, because that's very different with a crested gecko in comparison to a lot of other geckos. She just pooed on me. Ew, no. Do you feel good about yourself? Do ya? Well, there's a first time for everything, and I've never had one poo on me before, so what better time than when I've got the camera out, right? The other thing is, too, she might be a little bit frightened because I do have some lights here, and they are nocturnal, so maybe we'll put her away before the end of the video. Heating and lighting, that's perfect, right? Great segue. They don't need any sort of lighting, and they don't need any sort of heating at all. And, well, I guess I should say, as long as your house is a regular room temperature house, between 60 and 80 is where you want to keep them. Those are the extremes. So I wouldn't suggest keeping them always at 60 or always at 80. They actually benefit a lot from a night drop and differences in temperatures throughout the day and or season as well, I've heard. So what I do with mine is I just keep them at room temperature. I don't have them in my reptile room because it's too warm in there. It gets up to 82 sometimes. And that is going to be lethal for these guys. A lot of people will say 82 degrees is when your crested gecko is going to have an issue and you might have a dead crested gecko. So what I do is keep them upstairs, where in the wintertime it's around 67, 68, and in the summertime it might get up to 75, but that's it. And of course it's cooler during the night than it is during the day, so you're good to go no matter what your temperature is, as long as it's a regular inside a house temperature. If you don't have central air in the summer, be careful. That might be an issue with these guys. Humidity is another thing too. A little bit higher humidity than your house would be, which is why I suggest misting them twice a day and having that substrate in the bottom that holds humidity very well. And then of course you could have a large water bowl that is super shallow if you wanted to help with humidity if you have an issue with it, especially in the summertime, or the wintertime rather, when your furnace is on. But it's not really a problem for me. It always stays right around 70-ish, which is perfect. I suggest, in my opinion, from having these guys for over 8 years now, right around 70 is great. Some people will say up to 80 and as low as 60 or even 50, I've read, but I would suggest 65, 70 is great, and it can fluctuate. That is just the guide. Of course, this is a care guide, not a do as I say or your gecko will die. That's not what I'm saying at all. And they're not going to need any lighting either, special lighting, as long as they have a day-night cycle, so you know your room is light during the day and not at night, then you're good. But they don't need a special light, they don't need a basking light, they don't need UVB. You're good to go. It's pretty darn simple. And now we can get on to feeding, which is what I'll do with these guys when we're done, now that she's completely emptied all over my leg and my chair. And that's another thing that's super simple with these guys too. They don't need live insects. I mean, you could feed them pinhead crickets if you wanted. That's not against the recommendations of anyone that I know who's experienced with these guys. But what's simple is just regular crested gecko diet that you can buy at almost any pet store now. When I first started keeping these guys 8 years ago, we were told to feed them baby food. There wasn't really much on the market, at least in Canada here anyway, including the reptile store that's been around forever. They had nothing. So they suggested to me to feed them baby food, which is what we did. Didn't have the longest lifespans that they possibly could, but now you've got Repashy, you've got Pangea, you've got Clark's Gecko Diet. I'm sure there's others. I change between Pangea and Repashy depending on what's available most frequently. But right now I think I'm using Repashy. That's the one that you'll see me mixing up here for these guys and their offspring. You feed them about once every 2 days. Make sure that it doesn't get moldy inside there or attract fruit flies. And you just kind of mix it up. There's instructions right on the package. I just kind of eyeball it, right? So a little bit of water, a little bit of powder. I take something like a pen cap or whatever, stir it up, and then you're good to go. You just put it in there, they'll eat it, and then the next day, get rid of it. And then the day after that, feed more. You can even make it up in batches and store it in the fridge. I know people who do that, but that's if you have like a ton of geckos. I've only got 2 enclosures with crested geckos, so I don't need to do that. I just make it every other day. So now you know how big they get, you know how big of an enclosure they need, humidity, lighting, all that, what type of enclosure, and their behavior, which is really cool. Well, that's what we're going to get to next. The thing is with these guys, they do lose their tails, which is something that I've mentioned before. I don't really go crazy about with these animals, and these guys lose their tails a lot easier than most other geckos or any other animal that I've ever known. People say that you could just look at these guys, and if they're afraid, they'll drop their tails. I don't know when she dropped hers. She was a baby, like I barely had her for a few weeks, and I got them as very tiny, unsexable babies. It's no harm to them. They're not going to grow it back, though, which is something, so they're going to have this little cute little frog butt. They're not super fast. As you can tell, I've been having her the entire time. She's just kind of walking. They're not super skittish. They are kind of jumpy, though. They will jump from hand to hand if you give them the opportunity to. And because they've got these little sticky pads, which feel super weird, by the way, they can run on walls and ceilings and things like that. So you will see them stuck on the glass of your enclosures, which is pretty cool. And because they don't have eyelids, they can lick their eyes, which is super cool as well. Not that some animals who do have eyelids can't, but they can. And it's really cool to watch them lick their eyeballs, and they do it quite often. So if you like that type of thing, there you go. Also, they might save you 15% or more in your car insurance. A really cool thing about these guys, I'll prefix price and availability with. We thought they were extinct until 1994. That's crazy. That is 25 years ago as of making this video. And now they're on every table at every expo. They're in every pet shop or every reptile shop, a lot of pet shops as well. So from extinct or near extinct or thought to be extinct to one of the most easily accessible reptiles in the pet trade in less than 25 years, in less than 20 years, because 5 years ago they were pretty easy to find too. That's incredible. So as you can guess, really easy to find. They are not hard to find at all. They are everywhere. They're super cheap, especially as babies. I got these two babies, this one and Charizard upstairs, and they were 30 bucks a piece. And now they just made two babies, which if I wanted, I could sell for 30 bucks a piece. So there you go. Your initial investment's back, and I didn't even try. And morphs too. There's a lot of cool morphs. As far as I know, this is just a normal crested gecko. I'm not super interested in breeding them. They're not worth a ton of money, and it's not something that I am interested in doing. With crested geckos, I got them because they can be upstairs. They don't have to be in the reptile room, so they're around if I have an opportunity to sit down and watch TV with my girlfriend or something, and I can watch them. They're really fun to watch. They're interactive at night. If you wanted to, you could have like a low light dimmed bulb, so you could see them for a few hours during the evening, and they get kind of rambunctious around that time. And they're fun to watch eat, and they're super easy. So, in my opinion, this is probably the best beginner pet lizard that you could get. It's a toss-up between this and the leopard gecko, in my opinion. But this is an amazing animal. And there you go. That's everything you need to know about crested geckos. If you think I missed something, or if you want to add something, or if you've got a question, put it in the comment section below. I reply to everybody. So on behalf of Yoshi and I want to say thank you for coming back and watching this week's episode of Wiccan's Wicked Reptiles. If you liked the video, hit subscribe. I love making these. And because we do videos every week, twice a week, that means that I'll see you on Monday.